Johnny Tremain, Chapter 7, Part 3. Before reading, here are two questions to help guide you to the main ideas. 1. How does Johnny earn the respect of British stable boys and a British lieutenant? 2. Who just so happens to be a British stable boy? And why does Johnny befriend him? Part 3. Now the only regularity in Johnny's life was the great effort he made to see Scylla every Thursday, and the care he gave to Goblin. But when he went to the Afric Queen, he was going into enemy territory. The tavern had been taken over bodily by British officers, chief among whom was Colonel Francis Smith. Goblin was the only horse in the stable that did not belong to a British officer, for the landlord had sent his to the country, fearing they would either be commandeered by the occupying troops, or that he could not get hay for them. About the stables, British orderlies, officers, servants, and small British horseboys, the servants of the servants, were always congregating. Johnny paid little heed to them. They all knew that he rode for the Observer, but they also knew that he often rode for their own officers. Sometimes they picked on him, and once, when things got too bad and he felt he had to fight it out with the worst bully, the other boys, all his enemies, stood about demanding fair play, saying, "Well fought, Yankee, and that's neat." When he beat the bully, he had rather thought the whole gang would be on him the second he got the bully down. Instead, they merely respected him. So he made out better than he could have expected, until one day he found that Colonel Smith had a new horse boy. The one he had brought over with him had run away, so he had told his orderly officer to find a new one. And that boy was Dove. Johnny saw him grinning sheepishly at him, hoping they might be friends. They, the only two local boys at the stable. "You," Johnny muttered out of the corner of his mouth. "You trash, you milk pudding, you cottage cheese slug. You're not above going to work for them, are you?" "Honest, Johnny, I gotta eat. Old Tweety fired me." An orderly stuck his head in the stable. "Boy," he said to Johnny, "Colonel Smith has a letter to go to Milton. Please go to the parlor and see him or Lieutenant Stranger about it." A slow, gap-toothed grin spread over Dove's face. "Looks like you work for them, too?" "Looks like," said Johnny fiercely. He saw the colonel, went home for his boots and spurs, then took out Goblin and saddled him. One of the English boys had got Dove down and was twisting his arm, making him swear allegiance to His Britannic Majesty, gracious George III. Dove was swearing fast enough and protesting that it was the only way he really felt. All rebels should be hung. Johnny had a queer feeling at the pit of his stomach. He wanted to go to his rescue. He had to make himself remember that he hated Dove. "But that fellow over there," Dove was pointing to Johnny, "is really on the other side, and—" Johnny left Dove to his fate. It was a crisp, fresh day for summer, the respite after a week of unendurable heat. Goblin felt fine. He came sidling out of the stable, dancing and playing. Johnny let him move about, get the kinks out of him. He loved the horse. He loved the admiration he saw on every face. Grooms dropping curry bombs, officers looking out of windows and talking to each other and nodding toward Goblin, chambermaids, rich Tory gentlemen. All stopped to stare when Goblin played. Although he mostly kept his eyes on Goblin's wickedly flattened ears, it is the only way you can tell which way a horse will jump next. He did notice a thick, red face at the parlor window, Colonel Smith, and he heard his booming voice. "Boy, one moment." Doubtless, he had changed his mind about that letter from Milton. Lieutenant Stranger, his orderly officer, was coming out of the parlor. He had on no hat. His spurs were in his hand. He was a dark, young fellow, not much older than Rab, and something in both his color and carriage had always made Johnny think of Rab. "It's quite a horse you have there. He's all right. Well, you sort of hate to see a damned Yankee on top of a good horse like that. How much will you take?" "He belongs to my master, Mr. Lorne." "Colonel Smith," he called to the stiff, red face at the window, "this horse belongs to the Lorne, the printer. Boston Observer, you know. You can commandeer him all right." "You fix a proper price." "So? Boy, how much will your master take for him?" "He's not for sale." "Oh, he isn't, is he? You know damned little about the rights of His Majesty's Armed Forces. You get off, and I'll try him around the block, and see how I think he should suit the Colonel Smith." He knelt and buckled on his spurs. The handsome black washerwoman of the inn, Lydia, came out, carrying a hamper of wet clothes. Johnny had an idea. "All right, Lieutenant Stranger," he said politely. "Put the stirrups down a couple of notches. Now, hand me my gloves. I'll be back in 10 minutes." Goblin was watching out of the corner of his crystalline blue eyes. Not for months had anyone but Johnny Tremain been on his back. But the lieutenant mounted confidently, picked up the reins, and held them exactly as Goblin liked. The horse moved quietly out of the inn yard. Colonel Smith's face disappeared from the parlor window. "Lydia," said Johnny, as he strolled over to the washerwoman, "I'll help you with those clothes." She gave him a dazzling smile. "My land, Johnny boy, I could do off with a bit of help. Them Britishers expect a clean sheet every week, and seems like a clean shirt every day." Johnny gravely pinned a couple of shirts on the line, his mouth, like Lydia's, full of wooden clothespins. The ruffled shirts began snapping smartly in the breeze. "Sheets? Got 17 officers staying with us. We got sheets by the dozen. Look, Lydia, you lend me a sheet for just a few moments. If I get it dirty, I'll wash it. And besides, I'll hang up every sheet in your basket. Boy, I don't know what you're up to, and I suspect no good. You'll do as I say?" "If it's that Lieutenant Stranger who's took your horse away from you, I'll do plenty. He wants to commandeer Goblin for his colonel." Don't know commandeer, but it sounds awful dreadful cruel to me." "It is the way you cook things," said Johnny soberly. "My land, boy, you don't let them cook that pretty horse of yours." "I'll cook them first. Now, look. We've got to stand fairly near to the driveway like this. You get on that end of the sheet, and I on this, and we'll let her fill up with wind. Wait, he's coming back. So. Now let go, Lydia, quick, let's go." The sheet bellied out like a sail when Lydia let go. Goblin, quickly recognizing Stranger's skill and goodwill, had behaved admirably. The lieutenant thought he'd advise his colonel to pay a pretty fancy price for such a choice beast. Colonel Smith, a timid horseman, liked showy mounts. This one was showy all right, with his strange pale coat and mane and tail like mahogany. He was young and high-strung. Stranger believed he himself would have to ride him for the next month to get him gentle enough for his superior. But his gaits were like dancing. "Let me see," he was thinking. "Off alone." And then the whole earth blew up from under him and hit him a terrific blow on his seat. There was a splash as well. He had landed in a mud puddle. The horse was disappearing into the stable. He got up, ruefully looked at his white breeches, shrugged, and walked over to where Johnny was diligently pinning up sheets. Both he and Lydia had their backs discreetly turned. "Well," he said to Johnny belligerently. "Yes, sir?" I'd already noticed your horse worries a bit over blown paper in the street, things like that. I suppose you know that too? Yes, sir. Take those damned clothespins out of your mouth and turn around and answer me. Once the clothespins were out of his mouth, it was hard not to laugh. You what, sir? You flapped that sheet on purpose, just for the fun of seeing me sit in a puddle and to keep my horse out of the army. Oh, you, said Stranger, pretending to be angry. But Johnny knew that at heart he was not. Colonel Smith's great red face had once more appeared. How'd he ride, Lieutenant? God, sir, what? Where's the horse, sir? What have you been mucking about in? Mud puddle, sir. I fell off. He made no effort to excuse himself. Beast vicious, eh? No, sir, just a mite jumpy. No good for army work, nor even just hacking about Boston. But that damned boy, how does he manage? It's his horse, sir. Thanks, Lieutenant. You can look elsewhere for me. The head went in. Stranger was stretching himself lightly. I'll drink my beer standing up for a few days, he said to no one in particular. Then, as an afterthought, beer. Hi, kitchen, he yelled, in the arrogant way Johnny noticed the young officers always called for service. 2 tankards of beer, out in the yard. He turned to Johnny. What's your horse's name? Goblin. We'll drink to Goblin. Potboy, give that tankard to this young man. You know, of course, there's no real cure for a horse that shies as badly as that. I've been told he'll never be gentle. If he was as good as he looks, I'd have to guess that what he'd be worth. As it is, I'd not give 15 shillings for him. Except, and he smiled suddenly, for myself to ride. Have you schooled him in jumping? No, we're not fancy riders over here. At the foot of the common, you will find a series of hurdles we've put up. It happens, if happens, you are over there sometime when I am. I'll show you a bit. Thank you, sir. Does he still throw you sometimes? Sometimes. I'd have gone off fast enough when the sheet was let loose. That sheet! That was a trick. That was good. That was fine. Hi, you black wench. Finish this beer for me, and take the tankards back to the kitchen. And off he stalked, still chuckling to himself. Beginning with that day, when Goblin had tumbled Lieutenant Stranger in the mud, Johnny had no more trouble with the British stable boys. When it became hard for him to get the oats and hay for Goblin, they told him he might use theirs. But Dove, who was always swearing allegiance to England, and Johnny knew that he honestly was a Tory, was the butt of all their jokes. Dove clung to Johnny like a drowning man, and Johnny did protect him. He could not help himself. So Dove began oozing into his life. He spent most of his free time at the Observer's office, and was always complaining, always gorging himself on the scarce food, and bored both Johnny and Rab. But Rab said, and Johnny knew this was true, sometime the British would not stay tamely shut up in Boston. Sometime they'd strike out and seize the military supplies they knew the provincials were collecting. A colonel's horseboy might very well know a day or so, or even a few hours, before a colonel marched. It was up to Johnny to keep in touch with Dove. It was all right for Rab to talk. Rab was training with the armed forces. But what could Johnny do? Not much, it seemed to him, except be bored to death for his country.